Running cars. Welcome back. The trickle-down effect. Welcome to the channel. If you're new, consider liking, consider subscribing. I talk about cars on this channel. Sometimes I do reviews. Sometimes I talk about cars that I see on the side of the road. However, today I am going to talk about the trickle-down effect. Because modern cars, in general, suck. It used to be back in the day, if you wanted a reliable car, you went out and you bought a new car. And you traded in or you sold your jalopy because it would break down at some point and you weren't sure when or what it would cost. In order to get rid of that anxiety, you would go out and buy a new car, and while it was under warranty, you were fairly guaranteed a trouble-free ride. Which is not the case anymore. I don't know if you're keeping up with the news, the auto news, but every car manufacturer under the sun in North America is having trouble with cars. They're brand new cars. People are in a big kerfuffle, got their feathers ruffled, because prices have never been higher for new cars. And you know, there is an expectation that you're buying something that's worth that extra price. And what people are finding is that they're having major troubles with their brand new cars well before the warranties are up. And I drive a Dodge Hornet. I bought it brand new. The Dodge Hornet is a perfect example of this. There's all kinds of plastic in the engine. It's all modern technology that is not tried and tested. It has just been thrown into the car. Canceled. It's just been thrown into the car, and they want the consumer to basically test it, debug it, work out the kinks, which is normal, especially for a brand new make and model. When an automaker introduces a new model, I remember this with the BMW 6 Series. Yes, they build a car, yes, they do some testing, but really they get it out on the road and start selling it as soon as possible to recoup some cost for all that R&D. And then as the model ages, all the kinks are worked out from people like me who buy first runs of first models. Now the Dodge Hornet is a perfect example because they launched it and it was a big mess. And there have never been more recalls, or not recalls, but buybacks from dealerships and lemon laws enacted against it in the entire history of the automotive industry. And this car, when it launched, the comparables, you could argue that they were cheaper, that the price tag for the Hornet, for a decent Hornet, was quite high. And it is an expensive car. It was. I bought the most expensive one in Canada at the time. I found that out after I bought it. And I was on the Dodge Hornet forum, and I was finding out that these Hornets are having all kinds of major troubles. And I was actually driving on eggshells for quite a while, but I found out that I actually own a really good one. It's been really reliable, it's been super cheap and all of that. However, this has a tech package. It's loaded with technology, which is fairly common nowadays. And something as simple as the LCD screen that you use for access functions throughout the car. I knew when they started bringing in these screens that these would be a trouble point. These screens aren't going to last. Because here's the deal. When I look at an old 50s or 60s car, it's all mechanical. That Laurentian that I just looked at, it still had the radio working. It was wonky a little bit, and it needed a speaker, you know, but all you had to do was run new wires and clean up, take apart the radio and clean it up. But that's the thing, you could take it apart and clean it up, and you could keep that original radio in the car, and you could rebuild the car completely, and it would be mechanically fine. I always wondered when I buy these cars, when I buy new cars, and throughout my lifetime I've done that, because I'm a car person. I'm a driver, I love driving, and cars have to be part of that. And I look at these cars and I go, is this going to be, because I watched the baby boomers. I grew up with the baby boomers and all these guys retiring and things like that, and they all pick a car and they've all been working on it and they're taking it to them in retirement as a hobby. And it's always some 50s something or 40s or 60s, in some cases a 70s car that they work on. And then, yes, it's hard to find parts. Yes, you have to be mechanically inclined. But those cars are still on the road, and people are still collecting them, and people are still finding them, and they're still rebuilding them. I always wondered, like in the 80s when I had my Sirocco, I'm like, in 50 years, 60 years from now, am I going to be able to find an example of this and, rebuild it like these baby boomers are with these 60s cars from their youth? Because through the 80s and 90s, the age of plastics, cars ended up with tons of plastic on the interior. Then in the 90s, late 90s, plastic started happening in the motors. Now this is where the trickle effect comes in. Okay, the trickle effect is when something's brand new and they release it to the market, it's usually high priced. As a result, with the novelty of it and the price of it, only a certain select group of people can actually pay for that. You can call it rich people, you can call it whatever you want. I'll just say rich people within quotes. Because at the very beginning of car history, cars were a luxury item. They were a status symbol, and only the upper echelon of society could own a car. Then they invented, mass production, which made the car cheaper, and then all of a sudden, everybody was able to own a car. Almost everybody. For the most part, we'll just say everybody. So what happens with cars is that they'll introduce brand new technology and brand new ways of doing things in luxury cars. They really don't do it so much in the everyday Joe car because the profit margin isn't there. And the technology, because if something goes wrong, instead of replacing a few thousand cars, they'll have to replace a few million cars, and that's expensive. Bring in the Dodge Hornet. I'm just going to pass a car here. And that's what's happened. And it was something as simple as, electric windows or power windows. Okay? I remember, even in my day when I was young, we went to car dealerships, you could still have, base models still came with roll-up windows in some cases. And I grew up with wind-up windows. And if you wanted to option up your car, part of the luxury packages were power windows, power door locks. That soon became a standard, but those were only introduced in luxury cars as a luxury item. But because of the trickle-down effect, and they got better over time and cheaper to make, and the technology became more robust, it ended up in every car. So that nowadays, you cannot buy a car with wind-up windows. And such is the case with things like backup cameras, front cameras, side distance warnings, auto braking, rear cross traffic alert. All of these options, like the drowsy driver alert, you know, cameras watching you, making sure, those were introduced in Mercedes, in their flagship cars. Back in the day, you would have to pay over $100,000 in 1990s money or 2000s money in order to access features like that. However, they are now available on everyday Joe cars. Partially because the government's mandating it for safety, but mostly because there's a few things going on. You know, people see luxury items and they want them, so the automakers or the manufacturers of this stuff want to give it to as many people as possible because it means more money. And because we've asked for it as consumers, it's now here. And I'm mentioning just little, you know, accessory options on the interior of the car. However, I've owned some 1990s luxury cars. We had a Jaguar XK8, and the car before this one was actually, you know, a BMW 3 Series. Both of those cars, nothing but plastic in the engines. And you had to make sure to do your maintenance per schedule, otherwise you would end up with shattered plastic inside the motor. The Jag was really bad for this. I remember this because it was one of the first cars widely known to use as much plastic as it did in the engine. Jaguar was in 1998. Jaguar was in trouble. Ford bought them out. They bought a BMW engine that BMW made specifically to sell to other manufacturers. It was a 5 Series V8, beautiful engine. Excellent power, smooth power, lots of torque. The car drove amazingly with that engine in it. However, there was so much plastic in it. And I remember at the launch of that car, I was watching it on television and then saying, I don't know about all this plastic in the engine. You know, I don't know if that's a good thing. And it wasn't. To the point where the engine was so good, people wanted to keep it, but the replacement parts that they started to build for that car, for the plastic parts that would fail, they actually made them in metal and you could replace them. You know, the valve cover, there was all sorts of things with that engine. Any Jag owner at a Jag club knows about that motor and that year of cars because of that problem with the motors. My BMW was the same thing. Plastic this, plastic that, plastic pulleys, plastic, you know, and there were warnings for, you know, these cars and making sure that you service them before a certain time interval because the plastic ages so fast and becomes brittle. Now here's the thing with luxury cars. Luxury cars break down all the time. They are high maintenance. Partially because of all that new technology that they're putting in them and all the stuff that they're trying. But the thing is that the people buying those cars can afford that, right? It's when the common person tries to buy a luxury car and can't afford to maintain it or take it to the dealer whenever it breaks down or doesn't have the extra time laying around in order to do it or have somebody to come and do it or to take the car in, things like that. Things that rich people have that the rest of us don't. They are problem cars. Land Rover, Mercedes, BMW all come to the list. All come to that list. Like, I owned a BMW, and whenever I mention that, people laugh, because it's a money pit. And granted, yes, they are high maintenance. There's so many things that go wrong with it at all certain times as the car ages. However, if you do the maintenance on it, the car runs just fine. The thing is that people don't. BMW was one of the first car companies in order to get it out to the masses, rearrange the lease system, and all of a sudden, the common person could own a luxury car for a low monthly payment, or reasonable monthly, low for purchase financing and all of that. But we'll just say, if you had a decent enough job, you could lease a BMW without breaking the bank. And all of a sudden, everybody can do it. Honda can do it, Toyota can do it, GM can do it, Ford can do it. And the trickle-down effect of all of that is in modern cars now today. The average car now has all of those luxury problems. Yes, we wanted the features, we wanted the electric windows, we wanted the cruise control, we wanted the screens on the dashboard, we wanted the LCD gauge clusters, we wanted vented and heated seats, we wanted, LED lighting that fades instead of switches off, and a setting for how long it fades in the computer. BMW came out with the iDrive system, and that system had all of those settings in it, and it was complicated, it took forever, but you could set everything up in the car. However, not every car had that, but they all stole that kind of system, right? I can go through all the settings in this Dodge Hornet and access all kinds of weird things. I even have a G meter, which they only brought out for M cars, right? Only upper echelon race track day cars would have a G meter in it. However, I'm in my everyday 4-door family SUV, compact SUV, whatever you want to call it. It's the same as a RAV4, it's the same as a Honda CR-V, it's the same as a Mazda CX-5, it's the same as Hyundai Tucson, it's the same as all those size vehicles, the common vehicle that everybody drives nowadays, because nobody wants to buy cars, they wanted SUVs. Car makers stepped up and gave them that. And along with that, we got the trickle-down effect of all those luxury items that we all wanted, and along with that comes the problems of luxury cars. Okay? Now, I hate modern cars because they are so high-tech now that most of the problems are the technology. Take away the technology, the car would probably do well, I say. However, I gotta slap myself in the face for that one, because the engines are full of plastic. I didn't, changing from a BMW to a Dodge wasn't going from luxury to a common car. I just bought another luxury car, You can argue that, because of the Hornet's price tag, it is a luxury car, but I'll say this, it does feel like a luxury car. You should buy one. Sitting in this thing is awesome. But my point is that we've inherited everything from the trickle-down effect. All that stuff we wanted, we got as consumers. And now we're faced with super high prices, overpriced cars, if you will, not priced for the common person, with all the luxury car problems. You see, after the pandemic, or during the pandemic, automakers, you couldn't find a basic car with very little options. It was very difficult. They would only make a couple of them, maybe sell them off right away to get people on the dealership, the loss leaders. And then what they would do, the only other cars on the lot were optioned up versions of certain models. And I mean fully loaded, right? All kinds of, if you were shopping for a vehicle during that time, That's what was going on. It's still going on today. However, there are fewer, there's few more options of, base models, or very limited option models still available. And I think that's just because people aren't buying cars anymore. They gave up on those high price things. Nobody wants a $1,400 or $1,500 or $1,600 a month monthly payment for a vehicle. I'm in Canada, so, it's different than the United States. It's more money. It just sounds larger. And where does that leave us, right? We're asking for basic cars again. We don't want cars with power windows. We don't want cars with power locks anymore. We don't want cars with, automatic transmissions. We want manuals back. We need a clutch. We want a car that's more mechanical than it is electronic, only because we hope that it will lower the price tag and make cars affordable again. I would like to be able to blame the manufacturers for putting us in this situation by them making only luxury versions of their vehicles for us to buy. However, I was in the 2000s and I was going to sales seminars, and everybody was saying, just put luxury on it and sell it as luxury and people will buy it. And that's what happened. And it didn't matter if it was a condo, and it didn't matter if it was a car. The whole of society ended up going that way. Like, all the luxury condos being built in whatever town or city that you're in, and that aren't being filled up with people because it's too pricey. But that was the thing for the last 20 years leading up to the pandemic. We were all trying to buy luxury items, off-brand stores selling luxury items, and people are lining up to go buy those fake or doctored, or whatever you want to call it, the second tier luxury Louis Vuitton bag, Coach bag, right? And that's where we are. We asked for luxury, we demanded it, we were out there buying it, and car makers stepped up and said, we're gonna give it to you. Enough so that even a company like Dodge or Stellantis took Jeep and said, okay, this is no more the rugged off-roader. This is now, we're going to go up against Land Rover and turn our brand into this luxury brand. So now instead of paying, 30 grand for your Jeep Wrangler, it's now $50,000, $70,000. Right? And that's where we are today. It's not the automaker. Partially is the automakers. It is price gouging. Yes, it is profit pirateering, whatever you want to call it. But it's also the consumer saying, I want that LCD screen. I want to be able to hook my phone into that, but I don't want to use all the wires. I just want to be able to, play my music and watch my TikToks. I like that dash. Can I switch it between this mode and that mode? Can I, switch it from, speedometers and stuff to navigation? And that's what we got, right? We don't have gauges anymore. Gauges back in the day worked for 70, 80 years, for crying out loud. These screens are gonna last maybe a decade if you take care of them. Probably less than that. With the heat and temperatures inside of a vehicle sitting in the sun out in a parking lot while you're at work, the screens are gonna burn, they're gonna toast, they're gonna be toast. And look at all the features you lose when that happens. And look at how much it's gonna cost to replace it, right? Luxury car item, luxury price. The other thing too is, you can call it planned obsolescence if you want. Cars used to be built to last 200, 250,000 miles. Straight, and the automaker would actually write that, here you go guys, this car is gonna last that long. If you dig long enough, you can find that out. It's publicly known stuff, but most people just say, no, it'll last forever. 10 years, 5 years, whatever it is. It'll last past the warranty. And new cars aren't doing that, right? But you take that, and a lot of cars, halfway through their life, will have a big something happen. Something with the drivetrain, the engine, the transmission, suspension, or the four-wheel, all-wheel drive system. Something major will go wrong with it, and it will be a big price tag. But you would be through your warranty or towards the end of your warranty or well into your warranty in order for that, before that would take place, sort of thing, right? The old Jeep Cherokee used to fail. Their transmissions used to fail at 100,000 kilometers, and it was like clockwork on them. And it happened to my sister, you know, well before. But I'm just saying, so you take that 200,000 or 250,000, and let's say halfway through there is what, 120,000 miles. A major break would happen on a lot of cars. Not all cars are Toyotas, right? But something major would break, and you would always have to be prepared for that. But now that the car makers are now making cars for 100,000 kilometers, look it up. Generally speaking, most cars today are now built only to last 100,000 kilometers. It's not necessarily planned obsolescence. It's just that people do not own cars long enough for them to be making them last for so long. Shorten the time period, halfway through the life, you're at 50,000 miles. And that's what's happening. Engines are going bad at 50,000 miles. Transmissions are going bad at 50,000 miles or less. All-wheel drive, drivetrain components, are going wrong on some vehicles. 50,000 miles. Screens and technology, even sooner. If you get 50,000 miles out of them, you're in the green. You're taking care of it somehow. It's working out. Generally speaking, though, nowadays you'll drive off the lot a week later, some sort of light will ding for whatever reason, and your car will shut down. Your screen will turn off and you won't be able to start the car. You get a dead battery. This has happened to me. It's actually, we're discussing it on the Hornet forum right now. But I had a dead battery. This is a guy buying an RT and whatever. But I got a dead battery, and the only way my trickle charger wouldn't trickle charge it, so I boosted it in order to get it going. And when I boosted it, all the warning lights were on. I didn't want to tow it to the dealer. I live out in the middle of nowhere, and the dealer is like a half an hour away at highway speeds, and that's not going to happen. I wasn't going to tow it. So I boosted it. All the warning lights are on. The car was basically in limp home mode. I couldn't use any sport mode. I couldn't, there was I had to take it to the dealership in order to get it plugged into a computer, in order for them to turn off all the warning codes and charge up the battery and say it was good to go. That is a luxury car problem. That is not a common person car problem. However, that is what it is nowadays. These problems with these electronics like that used to be a luxury car problem, but due to the trickle-down effect, it's now a common vehicle problem. The everyday Joe driver faces this every day in their everyday Joe car. Whatever it is, whether it's your truck, it's an SUV, if you manage to find a car somewhere sold by somebody, that's what it is. And that's where we are, and that's what's going on with modern cars. I do like modern cars for their technology. It's a love and hate thing. I do know it's not going to last long. However, I do like the convenience of it. The driving thing with this Hornet and the technology package that it has is right up my alley. It works really well. I would like a manual and I would like a clutch, but that is now obsolete. You have to pay, this is a funny thing too, because you have to pay luxury car prices in order to get a clutch and a gearbox now, if you still can. Some sports cars will have it. However, when you get into the hypercar thing, there is no such thing, because the car will not operate with a clutch and a foot and a stick. They're having a version of a, what do they call that, CVT transmission, where it's like one gear. There is no switching gears. It just goes like an electric car. And yeah, there's another luxury car item, CVT transmissions. Banned in racing because they were so good. However, you can get one in a Nissan Rogue and it'll break within 50,000 kilometers. Trickle-down effect, people. Let me know what you think in the comments. I really wanted to bash the the automakers for this, because, you know, I'm driving around in an overpriced car. And most people will agree that a Hornet is an overpriced car. However, the trends of automaking does have the people's interest in it at some point, and we bought and purchased our way into this dilemma. And the automakers were just there to profit off of it. Not that they're not to blame. I think we're all in this together. And car culture is suffering because of it. However, cars have never been as good as they ever have been. Imagine time traveling back in time with your brand new modern vehicle to like 1940s, 1950s. In your Honda Civic SI Turbo. And you tell somebody who's in their Chevy Bel Air or whatever it is with the big V8 in it, go, how many horsepower do you have? And he's like, well, I got 125 or 150 horsepower in this big V8. And you're like, well, I got 270 in my 2-liter 4-banger. And it weighs as much as your engine does. The whole car weighs as much as your engine does. Like, that's where we are. That's where we are. That's where we are in the cars today. So, you know, I like to complain about modern cars, and I do have the love-hate thing because it does break. You know, it would be nice just to have a common car person. A common car for the common person. I think that would be nice. I think that would be great. And I think that would enliven the car culture that is, you know, disappearing because young people cannot afford cars. They cannot afford cars. Have you looked at the price of used vehicles lately? Some kid with a student loan going out to try to buy a used car? It doesn't happen. That's why, you know, I don't know. That's why they ride trains and or want 15-minute cities or rideshare programs. That's why car culture is disappearing. Yes, it's the high prices, but we all got there. We all got it there. We all made it happen. We all made it happen. Let me know what you think in the comments. Thank you very much for your viewership. I'm at 65 subscribers. I was like, woo! All right. See you in the next one.